Have you ever thought about this? Can you actually be a revolutionary by trying to save something? It sounds like a total paradox, right? But today, we're going to unpack a modern protest that forces us to ask that exact question.
So let's set the scene. It's January 23rd, 2026 in Minneapolis, and it is brutally, painfully cold. We're talking a wind chill of minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. But despite that, you've got tens of thousands of people packing the streets, protesting federal agents in their city. It's just this massive display of civil unrest in the most extreme weather you can imagine.
You can just feel the defiance in the air, And it's mixed with this really dark sense of humor. Take a look at this sign a protester is holding up. It draws this incredibly sharp historical parallel, and it just sets this supercharged tone for the whole confrontation.
Now, in the middle of all this, one protester says something that completely flips the script on how you might see this conflict, on who the real radicals are supposed to be. And that right there is the big idea. Get this, he's arguing that his group, the people out in the freezing cold, they aren't the ones trying to tear the whole system down. No, he believes they're the ones defending the established constitutional order against some other group that's trying to completely upend it. Okay, so let's break down what he's actually saying. He claims there's this minority faction out there that's trying to create a society without real laws, a place where sheer force is what matters, not legal principles. And as his proof, he's pointing to what he sees as direct attacks on our most fundamental rights, everything from free speech to due process. This just makes you wonder, doesn't it? Is this just some heated talk you'd hear at any protest, or does this whole idea of being a counter-revolutionary, of trying to conserve principles against a radical new force, does that actually have deeper roots in American history? Well, to figure that out, we're going to rewind the clock to a really pivotal moment in 1860. Abraham Lincoln, who isn't president yet, is giving this huge speech at Cooper Union in New York City. And believe it or not, he's making a surprisingly similar argument. And here you can see the conflict laid out so clearly. You had President Pierce, who had basically framed America as a nation exclusively for free white men, and he called anyone fighting against slavery a dangerous radical. But Lincoln, he just flips that whole idea on its head. He argues that defending human equality isn't radical at all. In fact, it's going back to the true, original principles of the nation's founder. I mean, this is just a masterful move by Lincoln. He's defining conservatism as sticking to what's old and proven, the founder's original vision. And by that logic, he's saying his side is the truly conservative one. It's his opponents who are pushing for something new and untested, who are the actual revolutionaries here. And this idea, defending old rights against the new radical power, it goes back even further than Lincoln. It goes all the way back to the American Revolution itself. See, the Founding Fathers didn't think they were just inventing a bunch of new rights out of thin air. Not at all. They argued they were protecting the long-established rights of Englishmen against King George III, who they saw as a radical tyrant trying to impose total control. So in a way, their revolution was all about defending tradition. Okay, so with all that powerful history in our back pocket, let's jump back to that freezing day in Minneapolis and really look at the specific constitutional challenges that protester was talking about. We'll start with the First Amendment. Just a super quick refresher for everyone. The First Amendment is pretty much the bedrock of American expression. It's what protects what you can say, what the press can report, and your right to get together and protest peacefully. So the source points to a few really specific examples of how these rights are allegedly being infringed upon. There's the story of a student whose visa was reportedly pulled just for co-writing a critical opinion piece. Then you have a legal observer who is just filming federal agents being told she was now in a domestic terrorist database. And then there's this memo which reportedly redefines political opposition, something totally protected by the Constitution, as a form of terrorism. So what does domestic terrorism actually mean in the eyes of the law? Well, it's not some vague catch-all term. The law defines it really, really narrowly. It requires someone to commit one of 51 specific, very serious federal crimes. We're talking things like using chemical weapons or explosives. Just disagreeing with the government? That doesn't even come close to meeting the legal bar.
All right, next up is the Fourth Amendment. And this one really gets to a fundamental right, the right to be secure from the government just busting into your home.
This amendment is about as clear as it gets. The government can't just barge into your house whenever they feel like it. They need a warrant, and that warrant has to be signed by a real judge, and it has to be based on probable cause that a crime has been committed. It's a core protection against the government having way too much power.
But then, we've got this report of a secret memo that seems to just fly right in the face of that protection. It allegedly gives federal agents the authority to enter people's homes without the one thing the Fourth Amendment absolutely requires, a judicial warrant.
And this isn't just some fringe concern. This warning is coming directly from a U.S. senator. He's framing this policy not as something that affects just one group of people, but as a direct threat to every single American. He calls it a dangerous abuse that violates the basic rules of a democracy.
You know, when you look at these specific constitutional challenges, on the First Amendment, on the Fourth Amendment, you start to realize they're pointing to a much larger, much more fundamental conflict over the basic question of what America is even supposed to be.
The 14th Amendment is another absolute cornerstone here. It guarantees due process and equal protection under the law. But look closely at the word it uses, person. It's so critical. These rights are for everyone within the country's borders, not just for citizens.
And this really brings us to the ultimate clash of visions that the source describes. So what is America? Is it a nation defined by shared ideals, things like liberty and equality for all? Or is it a nation of blood and soil, a place with a hierarchy based on race and origin, where rights only belong to a select few?
And that brings us all the way back to that frozen street in Minneapolis. When a government is seen as radically breaking from its own founding principles, do the people who resist to conserve those principles become the new revolutionaries? It's a powerful question, one that echoes from 1776 to 1860 and right into our world today.